I never imagined that working in a small bookstore would completely transform my entire world. I was arranging novels on the shelf, lost in my own thoughts about unpaid bills and my uncertain future, when the door chimed. That's when he walked in, Luther Harvey, the city's most powerful CEO whose face regularly graced business magazine covers. With him was his son, and the moment I saw them together, my heart inexplicably skipped a beat. Luther's eyes held a storm behind them, dark and turbulent, yet his lips carried no trace of a smile. He moved through the store with the precision of someone who viewed every moment as a transaction, every interaction as something to control and conclude quickly. His tailored charcoal suit fit him perfectly, and his presence commanded the entire space without him saying a word. "Where's your business section?" he asked without looking directly at me. His voice was cold, professional, the kind that made it clear he'd locked away every soft emotion behind an impenetrable vault. I quickly gestured toward the back corner of the store, but my attention was immediately drawn to the small boy clutching his father's hand. Toby couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. He had the most incredible hazel eyes I'd ever seen, filled with innocent curiosity, and his brown curls were adorably messy as if he'd just woken up. While Luther walked with rigid purpose, Toby's eyes wandered everywhere, especially toward the colorful children's books displayed near my counter. "Uncle, what about that dragon book?" the little boy asked in the sweetest voice, pointing excitedly at a picture book featuring a bright red dragon on its cover. My heart melted instantly at his innocence and enthusiasm. "Yes, buddy. That's a wonderful story," I said with a genuine smile, picking up the book and extending it toward him. "If you like it, maybe your father would." "Toby doesn't touch books without asking me first." Luther's sharp voice cut through the air like a blade. He immediately grasped his son's hand more firmly and shot me a look, filled with both anger and something else I couldn't quite identify. Was it fear, protectiveness taken to an extreme? I quickly withdrew my hand and smiled awkwardly, feeling embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just trying." "Just show me the business section," he interrupted, showing absolutely no interest in hearing my explanation or engaging in any further conversation. I led them to the appropriate section and then retreated back to my counter, but my heart felt heavy. Something about this interaction disturbed me deeply. It seemed as though Luther was deliberately hiding his son from the world, keeping him isolated from every person and every normal childhood experience. Toby's face had fallen completely when his father stopped him from accepting the book, and he'd quietly grabbed his father's jacket sleeve, looking down at the floor. I felt genuinely bad for this child who seemed to want nothing more than a simple moment of joy. Over the following 2 weeks, they became regular visitors. The same routine played out each time. Luther would purchase business books or newspapers, conducting his transactions with minimal words and zero warmth, while Toby would stand quietly beside him, occasionally glancing longingly toward the children's section. I started secretly leaving small bookmarks or stickers on the counter when Toby passed by, little gifts that might brighten his day. Luther either never noticed or deliberately chose to ignore these small acts of kindness. Then one day, while Luther was at the billing counter processing his payment, Toby quietly approached me. He whispered in a conspiratorial tone, "Are you my secret friend, Uncle Jasper?" He'd remembered my name from the tag I wore on my shirt. I crouched down to his eye level and said softly, "Yes, Toby, I'm definitely your friend." Luther suddenly grabbed Toby's hand and pulled him away without even looking in my direction. "Toby, we're running late. Let's go now." His voice contained only control, no warmth whatsoever, no acknowledgement of the human interaction that had just occurred between his son and another person. After they left, my heart felt burdened with sadness and confusion. Why was this man so intensely protective and distant? Why was he preventing Toby from having even the most basic conversations with others? This was a child who desperately needed some normalcy, some connection to the world outside his father's protective bubble. That evening during closing time, my colleague Marcus shared some information that helped me understand. "Jasper, that's Luther Harvey, man. His wife died 2 years ago in a terrible car accident. Ever since then, he hasn't let Toby out of his sight for even a single second. My cousin works at his company, and she told me that Luther actually has a special play area built inside his office cabin, so Toby can be with him at work. He doesn't allow anyone near his son. Nobody." Hearing this broke my heart completely. A tragedy had shattered this family, and now a grieving father was inadvertently making his son a prisoner of his own fear. A child who simply wanted some love, some normal interactions, was being denied the basic experiences of childhood. The next morning when Luther came in, I gathered my courage and said, "Mr. Harvey, if you ever want any recommendations for books for Toby, I'd be happy to help. I have a background in child psychology and literacy development." He looked at me, and for one brief second I saw something break in his eyes, a crack in that carefully constructed wall. But then it was immediately replaced by that familiar cold barrier. "I don't need suggestions for my son," he said with icy politeness. "Just do your job." But as he was leaving, Toby turned around, waved his small hand enthusiastically, and called out, "Bye, Uncle Jasper. I'll come back tomorrow." His voice was filled with such genuine happiness that it made everything worthwhile. And in that precise moment, I witnessed Luther's entire body go rigid. He was genuinely panicked by his son's attachment to me. His footsteps hesitated for just a second before he gripped Toby's hand even more tightly and walked out quickly, almost as if escaping from something dangerous. I stood there wondering what exactly Luther was so afraid of. What was it about his son forming a connection with another human being that terrified him so deeply? Was it the fear of loss? The fear of replacement? Or was it something even deeper, something more profound that I couldn't yet understand? All I knew was that both father and son were trapped in a prison built from grief, and somehow, unexpectedly, I was beginning to care about both of them more than I should. My rational mind told me to maintain professional distance, but my heart was already invested in this broken little family that had walked into my bookstore and somehow walked straight into my life. For 3 consecutive days, Luther and Toby didn't visit the bookstore. I found myself feeling concerned but reasoned that they were probably just busy with other commitments. Then on the 4th day, during my Sunday morning off, I was taking my usual walk through the neighborhood park when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Crying. A child's desperate crying. I stopped immediately and headed toward the sound. In a quiet corner of the park, near a row of benches partially hidden by overgrown bushes, I found Toby sitting completely alone. Tears streamed down his small face, and he clutched his teddy bear so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. He was trembling, whether from cold or fear I couldn't tell. "Toby!" I ran toward him, my heart pounding frantically. "What happened? Why are you here by yourself?" When he saw me, his crying intensified. "Uncle Jasper, my father is lost." His voice shook with pure terror. My heart sank as panic set in. "What do you mean lost? Where was he? How did you end up here?" I was watching a butterfly," Toby explained through hiccuping sobs, speaking rapidly as children do when frightened. "It flew into those bushes over there, and I followed it just for a second. When I turned around, my father wasn't there anymore." His small face was contorted with fear. I called for him, but he didn't answer. I immediately pulled him into my arms. "It's okay, buddy, everything's okay. I'm here with you now. We'll find your father together, I promise." I was trying desperately to remain calm, so Toby wouldn't become more frightened. But truthfully, I was panicking too. The reality of the situation was terrifying. If Luther discovered that Toby had been alone and that I was now with him, he might actually become violent. But none of that mattered right now. The only priority was keeping Toby safe until we could reunite him with his father. I quickly informed the park guard and asked him to make announcements over the park speaker system. Then I asked Toby, "Do you remember your father's phone number?" Fear had wiped his memory clean. He couldn't recall it. I searched the park thoroughly for several minutes, checking every path and calling Luther's name, but he was nowhere to be seen. Toby was growing increasingly exhausted and the weather was quite cold. His hands were shaking because he was only wearing a light jacket. I made a difficult decision. "Toby, let's go to my apartments. It's very close to here. From there, I'll call the police and get help finding your father, okay?" Toby nodded fearfully and gripped my hand with surprising strength. Inside my tiny studio apartment, I wrapped Toby in a warm blanket and made him hot chocolate. I turned on cartoons to distract him from his anxiety. He calmed down somewhat, but every few minutes he would ask, "Uncle Jasper, my father will come, won't he?" "Yes, buddy, absolutely he will. I kept reassuring him while simultaneously calling the police to file a report about the situation. Then Toby looked up at me with those enormous eyes and said something that broke my heart. "You're so kind, Uncle Jasper. You're not strict like my father. He always says don't do this. Don't do that. Sometimes I just want to play. Just play like normal kids do." My chest tightened with emotion. "Toby, your father loves you more than anything in this world. He's only worried about keeping you safe." "I know," Toby said quietly, his voice small and sad. "But I also wish he would smile sometimes. He's always so sad. When my mother was alive, he used to laugh. I've seen it in photographs. Such a young child, yet possessing such profound understanding of his father's pain." My heart ached for both of them. Suddenly, the doorbell rang loudly. Not just once, but repeatedly, desperately. I opened the door with trembling hands, and there stood Luther. His face was flushed red from exertion. His expensive shirt was wrinkled. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his eyes held a mixture of fury and terror. For the first time, he didn't look like the composed businessman. He looked like what he truly was, a terrified father. "Toby." He rushed past me and upon seeing his son, immediately dropped to his knees and pulled him into a crushing embrace. "Toby, oh God. Toby." His voice cracked completely. Toby began crying too. "Father, I was so scared." Luther held him with such intensity, eyes squeezed shut as if confirming that this was real and not another nightmare. After several long seconds, he pulled back slightly to check Toby's face. "Are you hurt anywhere? Did anything happen?" His voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. "No, Father. Uncle Jasper saved me and kept me safe." That's when Luther finally looked at me and I saw his eyes cycle through several emotions. First anger, then confusion, then something else I couldn't quite identify. He stood up and approached me. "What the hell were you thinking? Bringing him here?" His voice was low but filled with intensity. I raised my hands defensively. "Mr. Harvey, I found him alone in the park crying. I didn't have your phone number and he couldn't remember it. I informed the guard and also called the police." "You should have waited at the park," he said angrily. "You had absolutely no right to bring him to your private residence. You're a complete stranger." "I was trying to keep him safe. It was cold outside and he was—" "You don't get to decide what's safe for my son." Luther's voice cracked with emotion. "Do you have any idea what thoughts went through my mind? I thought I was going to lose him. Again." "Father, please," Toby shouted, interrupting. "Uncle Jasper is good. He helped me. Please don't yell at him." Luther's expression softened when he looked at Toby. He took a long, steadying breath, trying to control his overwhelming emotions. He went back to Toby and lifted him up. "I'm sorry, baby. Father just got very scared." He kissed Toby's forehead tenderly. Then he looked at me, anger and fear still present in his eyes, but now mixed with unmistakable gratitude. "Jasper," he said my name for the very first time. "Thank you for keeping him safe. But please, please don't do something like this again." He started to leave with Toby. At the door he paused without looking back and said, "I'll send someone to retrieve his teddy bear." He left it at the park. Then he was gone. I stood there feeling emotionally exhausted, confused, and strangely heartbroken. But later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. "This is Luther Harvey. I apologize for yelling at you. You did the right thing keeping Toby safe. And thank you. I genuinely mean that. LA." I read the text repeatedly. His words contained a vulnerability I never expected from him. And my heart did something strange and unfamiliar. The next morning, another text arrived. "If you're working today, we're coming to the bookstore. Toby insists on seeing you. LA." My heartbeat accelerated. Something was changing between us. Slowly but undeniably. The next morning at the bookstore, my heart was in a strange state. Luther's thank you text in that vulnerable moment kept replaying in my mind. Was he genuinely softening behind those walls he'd built? Or was this merely courtesy prompted by circumstances? The entrance bell chimed and they arrived. But this time something was distinctly different. Luther wore a suit, but his tie was absent, his collar slightly loosened, and he appeared less rigid somehow. Most significantly, Toby was holding his hand and smiling freely, looking genuinely happy. "Uncle Jasper." Toby ran to me and wrapped himself around my waist in an enthusiastic hug. I was surprised but pleased. "Hey, buddy. How are you feeling today? I'm great. Father said we're going to spend time with you today. Toby announced with pure excitement. I looked at Luther, who was slowly approaching. For the first time, that cold guard wasn't present in his eyes. Jasper. He said my name again, speaking it in a way that felt like he was properly acknowledging me as a person for the first time. Could we sit somewhere and talk? I need to speak with you. I was shocked but nodded in agreement. I informed my manager and we moved to the bookstore's quiet reading corner, where comfortable chairs created a small, private space. Toby wandered to his favorite spot to look at picture books. I guess, privacy. Luther sat down and folded his hands, clearly trying to find the right words but struggling. Finally he said, Jasper, I did a lot of thinking last night. When Toby was missing, I felt like my entire life was ending. Then when I learned he was safe with you, I realized how harshly I'd treated you. Guilt colored his voice. My heart softened slightly. Mr. Harvey, I completely understand. Luther, he interrupted gently. Please, call me Luther. I was surprised. This was a small step toward intimacy, but highly significant. Okay, Luther, I said slowly, testing how his name felt. He took a deep breath and continued. Jasper, when Toby's mother died, I completely fell apart. Lila was everything to me. When the accident happened, Toby was in the car with me. We were safe, but Lila was. I was driving on the highway, going a bit fast, and Lila was in a separate car with her friends. A drunk driver crashed into her vehicle. His voice broke. I remained silent, giving him space to continue. Toby witnessed everything. Luther went on, his eyes becoming moist. He saw the ambulance, the blood, all of it. He was only 3 years old. For months afterward, he didn't speak at all. He had constant nightmares. I promised myself I would never put him in such a situation again. I would protect him no matter what it cost. He looked directly into my eyes. But in that process I isolated him from the world. And he became lonely. My throat tightened with emotion. Luther, you're an excellent father. What you did was for your son's safety. Nobody could blame you for that. But I blame myself, he whispered. Every single day. Silence hung between us for several seconds. Then I said, Luther, Toby needs you desperately. He loves you more than anything. But isolating him from the world isn't the solution. He needs connections, experiences, a normal childhood. Luther nodded, wiping away tears. I know. When I saw how naturally you handled him yesterday, I realized that perhaps I can't do this alone anymore. He pulled out his phone and extended it toward me. Save your number here, properly this time. I was stunned. Luther, Jasper, I'm asking for your help, he said directly, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Toby trusts you completely. And I want to trust you too. If you're comfortable with it, would you be willing to spend time with Toby? As a friend, I don't want him to become more isolated than he already is. My hands trembled slightly as I saved my number. This was a monumental step. When I returned the phone, our fingers brushed briefly, just for a second, but it was enough to make me acutely aware of his presence. Luther pocketed his phone and said, Toby's birthday is next Saturday. He wants to invite you. If you don't mind. My heart pounded. I would be honored to come, Luther. Truly. He finally gave a slight smile, the first genuine smile I'd seen on his face. Thank you, Jasper. Really. As they prepared to leave, Toby returned carrying a stack of books. Father, can we get all of these, please? Luther looked at the books and laughed, a genuine warm laugh that transformed his entire face. Toby, we can't possibly read all these books in one day. Then Uncle Jasper could come to our house and help us, Toby suggested innocently. Luther and I looked at each other. In that moment something unspoken passed between us. A mutual understanding. Luther said, if Jasper wants to, then yes, he can visit. Toby jumped excitedly and grabbed my hand. Will you come today, Uncle Jasper? Please? I looked at Luther for permission. He nodded hesitantly. Okay, buddy, I'll come. I agreed. And just like that, gradually I began entering Luther and Toby's lives. That afternoon, when I arrived at their home, a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, I felt nervous. But when Luther opened the door wearing casual jeans and a simple t-shirt instead of his usual suit, and Toby pulled me inside to show me his toys, everything felt strangely natural. The three of us sat in the living room, Toby played with his toys while Luther and I talked properly for the first time. We discussed his company, my incomplete psychology degree that I'd had to abandon due to financial problems, our hobbies, and our perspectives on life. "You studied psychology?" Luther asked with genuine interest. "Yes. For 2 years. Then family problems arose and I had to quit. But my love for books remained, which is why I work at the bookstore," I explained honestly. Luther gave me a thoughtful look. "Your approach with Toby makes sense now. You naturally understand children." His appreciation made me feel valued. And that day, for a few precious hours, that house felt like a real home. There was laughter, conversation, and Toby playing freely. Luther smiled genuinely. When I prepared to leave that evening, Luther walked me to the door. "Jasper, thank you for today." Toby was so happy, and so was I. "I was too, Luther," I said sincerely. "This felt really good." He nodded, then hesitated slightly. "Could you come tomorrow if you're free? It's Sunday. We usually go to the park." My heart raced. "Yes. I'll definitely come." When I reached home that night, my heart held an unfamiliar feeling. Luther Harvey, who kept his son isolated from the world, was now inviting me repeatedly into their private life. And I was already becoming attached, not just to Toby but to Luther as well. Something profound was beginning and I had no idea where it would lead. From that Sunday park visit onward, throughout the entire following week, Luther and I gradually grew closer. He texted me daily, initially just updates about Toby, but slowly the messages became more personal. He shared details about his stressful office situations, his sleepless nights plagued by memories, and the guilt he carried about Lila. I listened, understood, and occasionally shared pieces of my own life story. Saturday finally arrived, Toby's birthday. I'd been feeling nervous since morning. I brought a carefully wrapped gift, the dragon picture book Toby had first seen at the bookstore, along with a handmade card where I'd drawn a dragon breathing colorful fire. I wanted it to be meaningful, something from the heart rather than just an expensive present. When I arrived at Luther's house, the decorations were simple yet thoughtful: vibrant balloons in primary colors, paper streamers, and a gorgeous chocolate cake sitting on the dining table. But there were no other guests present. "Yes, the 3 of us." "Uncle Jasper," Toby shouted the moment he opened the door, then ran straight to me. I lifted him up and hugged him tight. "Happy birthday, champ," I said, handing him the wrapped gift. Toby's eyes lit up brilliantly. "It's the dragon book, the one I wanted." He excitedly flipped through the pages, examining each illustration with wonder. Luther stood at the doorway, and for the first time, he was properly casual, wearing black jeans and a dark gray sweater instead of his usual business attire. He looked different this way, less like the intimidating CEO and more like just Luther, and incredibly attractive, though I pushed those thoughts aside quickly. "Welcome, Jasper," he said, and this time his smile reached his eyes. "Naturally. Please come in." Inside, we cut the cake together. Toby blew out 5 candles and made his wish with careful deliberation. I noticed he looked at me while wishing, then at Luther. His eyes held some innocent hope that I couldn't quite decipher but felt deeply. "What did you wish for?" I asked playfully. "I can't tell you or it won't come true." Toby giggled adorably. The 3 of us ate cake, Toby played with his new toys, and then Luther and I cleaned up the kitchen together. Standing side by side washing dishes, there was a comfortable silence between us that felt remarkably natural and domestic. "You gave a very thoughtful gift," Luther said quietly while rinsing a plate. "Toby absolutely loves it." "I wanted it to be something special," I replied honestly. Luther looked at me, and for one brief second the space between us seemed to shrink dramatically. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and something unspoken stirred in my chest. "Jasper, you're very special, to both Toby and me." My breath caught in my throat. "Luther." But right then Toby came running from the living room, positioning himself directly between us. "Father, Uncle Jasper, look at this building I made with my Legos." We both smiled somewhat awkwardly and followed Toby. He'd constructed an impressively detailed structure, a house with multiple sections. "This is our house," Toby declared proudly. "See, here's Father's room, here's my room, and," he pointed to a separate section, "here's Uncle Jasper's room." My heart stopped. So did Luther's. Toby continued with innocent enthusiasm. "Because Uncle Jasper will always stay here now, right?" So he needs his own room too. Complete heavy silence filled the space. I quickly tried to smile reassuringly. Toby, I live at my own apartment. But I want you to live here, Toby insisted, his eyes wide and hopeful. Then he suddenly looked at Luther and said something that stopped time itself. Father, Uncle Jasper should stay here permanently, right? Then we'll all be together, you, me, and… He looked at me with an innocent smile. And Father Jasper? Complete. Dead. Silence. A second later, Toby realized what he'd said. His smile faded and he looked scared. Sorry. I didn't mean to say that. But I quickly crouched to his level and gently held his face. Hey. Hey, it's perfectly okay, buddy. Mistakes happen. I understand completely. I smiled reassuringly even though my own heart was racing frantically. Luther's face had gone completely pale. He looked at Toby, then at me, then back at Toby. Toby, bedtime. Right now. But father, it's still early. Toby, now. Luther's voice was firm, though panic underscored every word. Toby's face fell. He looked at me with sad eyes. Sorry, Uncle Jasper. Goodbye. Luther took Toby's hand and led him upstairs. I remained standing in the living room, heart pounding, experiencing a confusion of emotions I couldn't properly identify or process. Several long minutes later, Luther returned. His face showed no clear expression, but his body language was rigid and tense. He approached me and stopped, seeming like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Luther, I apologize, I said first. I know that became awkward. Stop, he said, raising his hand. He closed his eyes and took a long, steadying breath. Jasper, this isn't your fault. Toby is confused. He's missing someone who isn't here anymore. And your kindness toward him, he started to see you as… His voice broke completely. I understood. Luther, I could never replace Lila. I would never try. I know it's not just about Lila, Luther suddenly said, his voice rising. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. It's about me. I'm scared, Jasper. I'm terrified. When Toby called you that, I realized how attached he's become to you. Deeply attached. And if you left, or if something happened, Toby would break again. And I couldn't handle that a second time. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time I was seeing Luther completely vulnerable and unguarded. I took a careful step forward, moving slowly. Luther, I'm not going anywhere, I promise you that. How can you promise such a thing? He whispered, his voice broken. Life is unpredictable, Jasper. Anything can happen. Lila also said she'd always be here. Then in 1 second, she was gone forever. My chest ached seeing his pain so rawly displayed. I moved even closer and said, Luther, I can't give you certainty about the future. Nobody can. But I can promise that while I'm here, I'm fully present for Toby, and for you. Completely. Luther looked into my eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. Why? Why do you care so much? We were strangers just weeks ago. Because? I paused. This was the truth. Raw and frightening, because you both have found a place in my heart. Toby is incredibly special. And you are too. Luther's breath hitched. We were very close now. I could feel his scent clean, woodsy warm. His eyes were fixed on mine, searching, questioning everything. Then he did something that shocked me. He slowly raised his hand and touched my cheek gently. Jasper, I feel something for you too. He couldn't complete the sentence, but he didn't need to, because we both knew. What was happening between us wasn't just friendship. It was something deeper, something scarier. Luther, I took his hand in mine and held it gently. It's okay to be scared. I am too. But we can face this together. If you want to. He looked into my eyes, and then he rested his forehead against my shoulder. I hesitated for just a second, then wrapped my arms around him. We stayed like that for several minutes, holding each other, silent, vulnerable, real. When we finally separated, something had shifted in Luther's eyes. Stay, he whispered. Please, tonight. In the guest room. I don't want you to leave right now. My heart pounded. Luther, are you certain? Please, he repeated simply. I nodded. Okay. I'll stay. That night, lying in the guest room, my heart was filled with strange emotions. Fear, hope, attachment, and something else I couldn't yet name properly. In another room, Luther was probably feeling the same way. And Toby in his room was dreaming of a complete family. None of us knew this was just the beginning of something beautiful and terrifying. The next morning was Sunday, and when I came to the kitchen, Luther was already making coffee. He wore casual clothes and seemed somewhat hesitant when he saw me enter. "Good morning," I said carefully. "Morning," he replied, extending a mug toward me. "Coffee? Thanks." I accepted the mug and we stood on opposite sides of the kitchen counter. An awkward silence hanging between us. Then Toby came running in wearing his pajamas. "Uncle Jasper, you're still here." He was genuinely happy. "Yes, buddy, I'm still here," I said with a smile. Toby looked at Luther. "Father, does this mean Uncle Jasper will stay here every day now?" Luther glanced at me nervously, then back at Toby. "Toby, we'll discuss this later, okay?" Toby nodded sadly and sat at the breakfast table. That day, the three of us cooked breakfast together. Luther made pancakes, surprisingly delicious ones. I cut fresh fruit, and Toby set the table. It was simple, domestic, and my heart felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through it. After breakfast, Luther called me to his study. Toby was watching television, so we were alone. "Jasper," Luther began, clearly trying to say something important. "About last night, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was emotional." "Luther, if you're regretting..." "No," he said quickly. "No, that's not it at all. I actually want to say the opposite." He took a deep breath and looked directly into my eyes. "Jasper, these past few weeks have been life-changing for me. You've created a difference in Toby's and my life that I can't fully explain." Toby is smiling, laughing genuinely. His nightmares have decreased significantly. And I feel somewhat more alive. My throat tightened. "Luther, I need to tell you something," he continued, nervously putting his hands in his pockets. "And I need complete honesty, because I don't want things to become complicated later." He paused. "Jasper, I'm falling for you. Romantically. I know it's fast. I know it's confusing, but it's the truth." My heart skipped several beats. I was stunned. "Luther, I didn't know you felt..." "I didn't know either," he admitted. "After Lila, I thought I'd never feel this way about anyone again. But you're different, Jasper. You broke down my walls without forcing anything. The natural connection you've built with Toby, your kindness, your understanding, I found myself drawn to you." I was speechless. My emotions were a complete jumble. "But," Luther continued, "I'm not asking you to decide anything immediately. I know this is overwhelming. I just wanted to be honest. And if you find this weird or uncomfortable, I understand completely. You can ignore this." "Luther, stop," I finally said. I stepped forward and stood close to him. "I'm feeling something too. For you. And for Toby." I was confused because I didn't think that we. I struggled to find words. Luther's eyes widened. "Really? You feel something?" "Yes," I said softly. "You've created a difference in my life too, Luther. When I see you with Toby, when I see your vulnerability, your strength, something happens in my heart. I wasn't sure before, but now I am." Luther's face softened, and his eyes held an ocean of emotions. "So, you're willing to give us a chance? As more than friends?" My heart raced. "Yes. But Luther, we need to be careful. For Toby's sake. I don't want him hurt." "I don't want that either," Luther said quickly. "Toby is my priority. Always. And I know he is for you too." "Exactly," I said. "So we'll take this slowly, carefully, and see if this works." Luther nodded, and I saw relief and happiness in his eyes. "Thank you, Jasper. Your trust means everything to me." Then he did something unexpected. He reached forward and took my hand. Properly, fingers intertwined. We looked at each other, and in that moment, something was sealed. A silent promise. Over the next 2 weeks, gradual changes occurred. I spent more time at Luther's house. We had dinners together, movie nights with Toby, and sometimes after Toby fell asleep, Luther and I would sit and talk about everything. Life, dreams, fears. One night, Luther told me the complete story of him and Lila. Their college romance, their wedding, Toby's birth, and then that tragic accident. He cried, and I held him. He promised he would always remember Lila, but he wanted to move forward now. For himself and for Toby. "I don't want Lila replaced," Luther said, "but I want to create space for a new chapter. With you." I wiped his tears and said, Lila will always be an important part of your and Toby's life. And I'll respect that. Always. Luther hugged me tightly, and that night something inside him healed. Then one Friday evening, something unexpected happened. Toby was asleep, and Luther and I were sitting on the living room couch with wine glasses. Luther had offered and I'd accepted. The lights were dim, soft played in the background. Jasper, Luther said, turning toward me, I want to ask you something. Yes? Would you officially become my partner? In a relationship? His eyes held nervousness. My heart swelled. Luther, yes. I want that. His eyes brightened and he placed his hand on my cheek. You really mean it? I really mean it, I confirmed. And then Luther slowly leaned forward, bringing his lips close to mine. Hesitant, asking for permission. I moved slightly forward, granting it. Our kiss was slow, gentle, full of unspoken emotions. Years of loneliness, fresh feelings, hope and promise. When we separated, both our breaths were heavy. I apologize, Luther whispered. If that was too fast, no. I held his face. That was perfect. He looked into my eyes, vulnerable and beautiful. Jasper, I'm already falling in love with you. I know it's quick, but it's true. Tears filled my eyes. Luther, I'm falling in love with you too. He kissed me again, this time with slightly more passion, and we sat there on that couch together, holding each other, kissing as if the world belonged only to us. And that night something became permanent. We were officially together, and my heart was so full I couldn't explain it. The next month passed like a beautiful blur. Luther and I were officially together, but we decided not to tell Toby directly yet. We wanted him to naturally adjust to my increased presence first. But Toby was smart. He noticed I came every day now, that dinners were always shared, and weekend plans always included all three of us. One Sunday morning, the three of us were at the park. Toby was on the swings, laughing freely, while Luther and I sat side by side on a bench. Casually, Luther placed his hand over mine. A simple gesture, but meaningful. You've changed everything, Jasper, Luther said quietly, his gaze on Toby. I never thought I could be happy again, that I could love someone again. You've changed me too, I said honestly. Before, I was just existing, living a routine life. But now I have a family. Luther looked at me, his eyes soft and full of emotion. Family. Yes. Exactly that. Then Toby came running from the swings, tired but happy. Father, Uncle Jasper, I'm hungry. Let's get ice cream then, Luther suggested. Yes. Toby jumped excitedly and grabbed both our hands, one hand holding Luther's, one holding mine. As we walked like that, a perfect picture, my heart felt overwhelmed. This was what I'd always wanted. Belonging. Love. Purpose. At the ice cream parlor, Toby ordered his favorite chocolate flavor and we sat at a table. Toby was enjoying his ice cream when he suddenly said, Uncle Jasper, will you always stay with us now? Luther and I looked at each other. This was the moment. Luther crouched to Toby's eye level and said, Toby, if I ask you something, will you answer honestly? Yes, Father. Toby nodded seriously. If Uncle Jasper stayed with us permanently, in our house, how would you feel about that? Toby's eyes widened. Really? He'll live with us, if you're comfortable with it, Luther clarified. Because Toby, I want Uncle Jasper and me to be close, like boyfriends. Do you understand what that means? Toby thought for a moment then nodded. Like how Mother and you were. Luther's throat tightened. Yes, son. Something like that. But this won't replace your mother. She'll always be your mother. Toby made a serious face and said, I know, Father. Mother is in heaven. But, he looked at me with a smile, Uncle Jasper is special too. I want him to stay with us. Tears filled my eyes. I hugged Toby tightly. Thank you, Toby. You're very special to me too. Luther looked at both of us and his eyes became moist as well. So it's settled. Jasper will officially move into our house. The news was overwhelming but beautiful. The following week, I packed my belongings and moved to Luther's house. Officially, permanently. I left my tiny studio apartment and moved into a real home. The first night, as I was unpacking in what was now officially my room, Toby came to me. I could tell from his body language he wanted to say something. What's wrong, buddy? I asked, sitting at his level. Toby twisted his fingers nervously and said, Uncle Jasper, I want to ask you something. Yes. Ask me anything. Can I call you something different? he said hesitantly, his eyes both hopeful and scared. My heart skipped. What would you like to call me? Toby looked into my eyes and whispered, Father Jasper? Because you're also my father now, right? Tears streamed from my eyes. I was so overwhelmed that words wouldn't come. I just hugged Toby tightly and said, Toby, I feel honored. If you're comfortable with it, then yes. You can call me Father Jasper. Toby hugged me back and said, I love you, Father Jasper. I love you too, Toby, so very much. At the door, Luther was standing, watching and hearing everything. Tears were flowing from his eyes, but he was smiling. After Toby fell asleep in his room a while later, Luther came to me. You heard? I asked. Yes, Luther said, cupping my face in his hands. And my heart, Jasper, you're truly a gift. He kissed me deeply, passionately, and we held each other as if we'd never let go. That night, lying in bed in my new home in my new room, my heart was filled with peace. I'd never imagined my life would change like this. A journey that started with a bookstore job had led me to a complete family. The following months weren't entirely smooth. Challenges came. Some of Luther's relatives had problems with our relationship, and we received some judgmental comments. But Luther always supported me. He made it clear that Jasper was his choice and his priority. Toby also proudly told his friends at school that he now had two fathers. Some parents questioned it, but Toby's teacher was supportive and handled the situation gracefully. One special evening, 6 months later, Luther called Toby and me to the garden. He'd hung fairy lights and beautifully set a table with candles. What's this? I asked, surprised. A celebration, Luther said, smiling. It's been 6 months since you came here. And I want to say something. The three of us sat at the table. Luther looked at Toby, then at me. Jasper, these past 6 months have been like a dream for me. You've filled Toby's and my life with so much happiness and love that I'm grateful every single day. And I want to officially promise you in front of Toby that I'll always stay with you. In good times and bad times. He pulled a box from his pocket. My heart stopped. This isn't an engagement ring because I know our relationship is still relatively new. But this is a promise ring. Luther opened the box, revealing a simple silver band. Jasper, read, will you be my forever partner? Tears flowed from my eyes. Luther, yes, yes, I'm yours, always. Luther placed the ring on my finger and we shared a passionate kiss. Toby clapped and shouted, hooray, now we're a permanent family, and that was the truth. We were a family, imperfect, unconventional, but full of love. That night, after Toby was asleep and Luther and I stood on the balcony looking at stars, I held his hand and said, Luther, thank you for bringing me into your life. No, Jasper, Luther said, cupping my face. Thank you. You taught me to live again. You taught me to love again. You gave me hope. We kissed under the stars, promising that no matter what the world said, we'd always stay together. And when I lay in bed that night, Luther beside me, we now shared the same room, and Toby sleeping peacefully in the other room. My heart felt complete. I'd helped heal a broken family, and in the process they'd healed me too. Together we'd started a new beginning. A life filled with love, trust and hope. And I knew this was just the beginning. Our future held more happiness, challenges and memories. But the three of us were together, and that was the most important thing of all.